Hi, everyone. Welcome to our very first Atlan Activate, our first public town hall for 2022. Firstly, thank you, everyone, for taking the time and joining us today. And we're going to try and keep today super interactive. So thank you for taking the time. Some housekeeping. Say hello in the chat with your name and what you're working on and where you're from. And as we're going through the session, I'm sure there are going to be a ton of questions and answers. As you do that, Zoom has a feature called Q&A. So when you open up the panel, it says like your Zoom panel at the bottom of your screen. It would say Q&A. Please go in and add in your Q&A there, and we'll take them at the end in the AMA. Just setting a little bit of agenda for today. We're going to start by telling you a little bit about our story and how we got to where we are. Cover some core product principles. Try and keep that the first two sections really short so you can get to product as quickly as possible. We're going to go through a pretty deep live demo. Come back, talk about some things that we're seeing in the future, and finally open up to an AMA. So with that, just want to actually get a quick sense of who's in the room and start out a quick poll just so we have a quick sense of what the audience is looking like. So Lena, do you want to just kickstart the poll? It's a quick show of hands who's in the room today, just so we get a sense. Data teams are super diverse, so we'd love to get a sense of who we have in the room today. And ending the poll. Wow, this is really interesting. I think we need to do a follow-up poll on the others to get a sense of what personas are in the room. But super excited to see the diverse representation in the room. So thank you for sharing that. Cool. So getting started with a little bit of our story at Atlan. For those of you who don't know, at Atlan, we actually started out as a data team ourselves using data science for social good. We were doing a ton of work with folks like the United Nations, the World Bank, dealing with a wide variety and scale of data. So as you can see on the screen, at one point processing data for 500 million Indian citizens and billions of pixels of satellite imagery. While all of that sounds like very cool projects on paper, the reality on a daily basis was that it was not. So what you see on the screen, these are actually real life Slack messages that we've reconstructed from our own team. So messages like, what does this column name mean? Which data set should we use for this analysis? Like, this was like the standard day in our lives, right? I think we could actually make a whole factory of memes of our day in a life data chaos stories. Well, actually, we did. So, I mean, this was like just our day in the life, right? Like when someone messages you saying when they have a quick question about the data set. So I want to do a quick, again, poll with these memes to get a sense of which ones you actually find the most relatable in your day-to-day work. I'm really excited to know which one comes up the most. They're all going neck and neck. I can see like the real-time data changing. Okay. Wow, those are the results. I mean, collaboration and trust challenges followed by data service requests. Followed by tribal knowledge was first. Tribal knowledge, the first, followed by collaboration and trust challenges, followed by data service requests, and then onboarding chaos, the hero that has all the context about your data in their head. While sometimes it can be fun to look at these memes, the reality is that on a daily basis, this actually also led to a ton of nightmarish life experiences. So personally, for me, I remember when we were a data team ourselves, there was this one time where I got a call from one of the cabinet ministers of India, and he said, Prukalpa, the number on this dashboard is broken. And I was like, oh my God. I opened up my laptop, saw a 2x spike in the data, realized that something was wrong and didn't know what to do with it. And then went and called my project manager, who called my analyst, who called my engineer, who pulled out audit logs, but couldn't actually troubleshoot because he didn't know what the variables meant. I remember this one time where I, sat on the top of our terrace and legit cried for 3 hours because an analyst quit on me exactly a week before a major project was due. And he was the only one who knew everything about our data, right? And I was like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to deliver this project to our client, right? And this was like the story of our lives. Like we were spending 50-60% of our time dealing with these kinds of issues. And we hit this breaking point and we realized we couldn't continue to scale like that. And we said, we have to find a better way to scale. So we got our entire team together and we started what we called the assembly line project. We used this methodology from the Google design sprints, and we basically, tried to turn every problem into an opportunity. So we said, HMW, how might we reduce repetitive tasks? How might we prioritize tasks across projects? How might we plan timelines better? How might we reduce dependencies on individuals? And then we basically tried to work backward from there to actually start building stuff to fix these problems. We started looking at teams around us, right? We tried to learn from product teams. We tried to learn Agile. We tried to learn from DevOps teams. We tried to learn from lean manufacturing and supply chain teams. And that was when we actually got it right. Over 2 years, we built tooling that made our team 6 times more agile. We went on to do things like build India's national data platform, which the Prime Minister himself uses. But what was really cool about that project was it was built by an 8-member team in 12 months, also one of the fastest of its kind globally. I iterated through these learnings and realized the one core insight that made a lot of this happen. It was this realization that in data teams, diversity is not a bug, it's a feature. Data teams are one of the most diverse teams that exist in the organizational fabric. Analysts, engineers, scientists, business, they all have their own tooling preferences, BI tools, warehouses, DBT. They all work on their own use cases and their own diverse problem statements, creating a diversity of assets, right? Tables, models, code, dashboards. That diversity is the only reality that makes data teams what they are today. And once we were able to realize that this diversity is not something that should be treated as a bug, but actually build around this diversity, we were able to figure out how we can actually make our team work better together and do awesome things. We went on to write this culture code manifesto that we call the DataOps culture code. Saying things like data assets should actually be treated and maintained like assets, which means they should be reusable and reproducible. It's a team sport, right? And because it's a team sport, great collaboration requires a great system of trust. So when that number on a dashboard is broken, the analyst should know that it was actually the pipeline that failed and it wasn't the data engineer who didn't do their job. And optimize for agility. In today's world, automation by default, so data teams can actually move as quickly as they need to for the business. Since then, we ended up taking some of those tools that we built and said, hey, is there a way we can help data teams around the world? And opened up what you know as Atlan to other data teams around the world. In the last couple of years, we've been really fortunate to work with some amazing teams, some teams that I think are in the room today. Thank you for joining us in this journey of building out what we hope is the future of how data teams work. And what's been super fulfilling is seeing sort of that industry come alive as well. In 2020, Gartner launched their inaugural report for DataOps, in which they named Atlan as a cool vendor. Forrester Wave recently renamed their report on machine learning data catalogs to enterprise data catalogs for DataOps, and Atlan was a top leader. And it's been super fulfilling to see DataOps sort of go from being this one-off thing that we wrote in a culture code to something that is actually turning into a mainstream way that data teams are working and using in their day-to-day work. So with that, without further ado, we want to welcome you to the first Atlan Product Townhall, where we want to unveil the all-new Atlan. And I want to welcome my co-founder, Varun, who is the heart and soul of our product, to walk you through our product principles and dive into a demo.
Yeah, thanks, Prukalpa. So I'll just get started. I'll share my screen and we'll go from there. Yeah, okay. So we were talking about diversity. So we'll start with the 4 pillars of Atlan. And today's demo is, in fact, broken into these 4 pillars, and we'll go through one by one. 1, diversity in data assets. Data assets are beyond rows into columns. 2nd, diversity in humans of data. In fact, I guess the poll was very relevant today. Not just analyst data engineers, there is a huge plethora of others as well, which we don't know. And I'm sure we'll discover in days to come. Diversity in data tools, and in the end, diversity in use cases. So we'll try to go one by one. So without talking any meta, just let's get down to the world of metadata. So let's get started with the first one, which is diversity in data assets. So we all know, I guess, that data assets are beyond rows or columns. You have tables, views, databases, schemas, explorers, metrics, requests, issues, and all of them have their own unique metadata. On one hand, you have the technical metadata, which is rows, columns. Then you have the human metadata, which the data consumers or the business folks know about that data asset. Then you have the producer metadata, which people who are actually generating these assets in their Airflow pipelines, in their DAGs, in their DBTs, they know about this, right? And together they create that asset 360 or data asset. And what happens is it creates that data asset sprawl. And that sprawl is a black box, and no one knows where do these assets even exist. So now on that note, let's skip to my favorite part, which is just showing you the Atlan workspace. So quick check, you should be able to see a Atlan workspace where this is greeting me good evening right now.
Yeah.
Awesome. So assume this is day 0 and you're just getting started with Atlan. So the first step is to actually bring these assets. So let's get started. Let's create a new workflow. What you see right now is a marketplace for all these packages where you can connect to your favorite tooling, your data stores, your BI tooling, your enrichment stores, your DBTs, your Fivetrans, and bring those assets from these sources. And these are completely DIY. And so you don't need to be a technical engineer to actually set this up. So I just, for the sake of this demo, we'll scan through what Snowflake looks like. So I just selected Snowflake. It gives me a complete DIY experiences, 3-step process. You can bring in your credentials, test some authentication, let Atlan know what metadata assets you want to bring in, and you are done. In case you still struggle to set this up, it's backed by some amazing Atlan docs, which are very interactive as well. So you can just check it out. Again, it helps you cater through every step of the process as well. Similarly, apart from Snowflake, you can set up your BI tooling, you can set up your orchestration tooling, and bring all metadata from there. Once that's set up, let's go to the next step. What happens? So assume we've had this set up. I've just opened up the Atlan search bar. I found an asset which looks like verified. Let me just jump to that asset. Now, what you see on the screen right now is what we call an asset profile. Now, for a quick reference for the diverse audience that we have today, this could be a Salesforce account profile where you have all information about your Salesforce account. Or for engineers, this could be the GitHub repo where you have code, but you have readmes, you have documentation, you have issues, you have everything there. Or this might be a LinkedIn, similar to your LinkedIn profile, where it covers the 360 information about your professional journey. So once you scan through, bring this metadata from all these sources, it creates this asset 360 profile. And I'll take you through parts of it one by one. So on one hand, you have the technical metadata, which is the roles, the columns, the descriptions that might be available. You have the governance metadata, which is the business terminologies or the concepts, your owners, who are the actual people that are owning it, classifications, and certifications, so that you know that this data is trusted, and the data consumers, when they land on this asset, they know that this is something it's verified by the team. So this talks about metadata, right? But we talked about diversity, which means that it changes for different assets. So let's now move to maybe some other asset. So maybe let's go to a dashboard. And as soon as if you land on dashboard, if you see the metadata evolves, you have now views coming, how many times these have been viewed. You have readmes that have been built in. You have different folder structure, hierarchies that are available for BI. Now, for this, let's move back to the table asset. Now, let's look on the right top. There are different actions that you can take. And it all depends on what personas you are coming from. One, you can copy this link. And this is my favorite part, favorite action on this asset profile. Data assets were never referenceable because they never had a link. You only get to know schema name, database name. They never had a URL. What this does, it creates an asset URL. So you can share this internally, reference an asset in your docs or in your Jira tickets, and this becomes a URL which makes a reference to all your assets in your ecosystem, right? If you're lazy and you use Slack, you can just send this out and share it in your Slack channel. So let's try doing that. So as soon as it does that, let's switch to a Slack channel. Now, this is a Slack channel. As soon as and I'm sure all of you in your teams also have similar Slack channels, you'll find that asset shared and all the metadata that was available on Atlan is also now unfurled and available on Slack. And let's give a big right tick right here. Apart from that, you also get to see other kind of assets that are available. You get to see resources. This could be links, documentation assets that are sitting in your documentation tooling, like Confluence, your PPTs, your Miro boards, your PDF files. You can look at the queries that are attached to this. So this could be a query that is linked to this. You can see all your Jira issues, which are linked to this. And if you want to extend, you can even extend this and bring your quality tooling, quality metadata, operational metadata, and create that asset 360 we were talking about when we just get started. So apart from metadata, once we scan and when you run these packages, the other thing we create is we create relationships between these assets. And one use case of creating these relationships is Lineage. So the next part, let's jump to this Lineage tab. What you see here now is this is the asset we are in. And you see on one hand, this is coming from an upstream table in stuck-out orders. And on the downstream, this is connected to a BI Explorer, which is on Looker. Now, but if you see a big tick, which means that there is further lineage upstream that this is coming in from. And as soon as you click that, now suddenly you see this is coming from a transactional system in stuck-out orders, which might be in Postgres. So if I just zoom out, what this creates is, it creates that end-to-end lineage from your transactional system to your analytical, the first layer, this may be the raw layer, your final layer, this could be the end user layer, the analytics layer, which also connects to then BI. So the next time you want to do a root cause analysis, why that dashboard number was wrong, you don't need to go to the terrace. You can just come here and figure out what dashboards, what's actually broken. And not only that, you can look at right at the column level. So if I click that department, I could easily see where exactly these columns are getting derived from. And beyond this, we also bring the operational metadata. So if I click this big 5-ton logo and I open this sidebar, you also get to see actually the operational pipeline, which is actually bringing this. So in case you have access to 5-ton, this will actually open up the operational actual pipeline, which is actually running this and bringing this data from Postgres to Snowflake. Now we've created Asset 360. We have leveraged the relationships to create Lineage. Now, how do we reuse some of this work that has already been done automatically? So one of the things you can do is, let's click this eval set column. So one of the things we do is, you can quickly add, like, let's say, suppose this was PII and you want to classify this column right at your transactional database. As soon as you click this, what happens is, we'll be able to propagate this across your analytical stacks. So if you've marked once that your eval set is a PII, this means that irrespective of downstream where it gets used, it'll always be marked PII. And we'll talk about in some of the next part of the demos of how you can actually leverage some of these tags to create governance controls on Atlan. Let's try opening up some more assets. Now, the other thing, if you see, when I clicked this column that popped up was this suggestion. This is a favorite trident bot, what we call it internally, where we give users a metadata nudge, where because we know that this column there's already a description that was set somewhere in maybe the development environment or maybe some other analytical layer, we're able to suggest some of these descriptions. So we're able to reuse some of the existing metadata that already exist in the asset landscape and create and nudge these suggestions. So let's quickly just do an apply. And we've just saved some time for our colleagues when next time they look at these columns. So we've looked at bringing the metadata, we've looked at Asset 360, we've looked at relationships, and we've looked at how do we reuse it. And once you set up all of this for all your connectors, you'll be able to create this powered discovery experience from a data consumption. It has all your connectors, all the metadata, and you can filter through, consume all of that, and discover and consume the asset that you're looking for. Now, one of the common questions that always comes up as soon as data teams get started is when they look at this. They're like, okay, there are 58,000 assets, and we was talking about data sprawl, right? And the first question they start asking each other, why do we have so many assets? And so, which is what we've recently rolled out, like a metadata analytics center, where you can start at an aggregate level, start looking at your assets. So if I select Snowflake, you can quickly see how many assets are there, how many are currently verified, what's the classification looks like. You can look at column, how many PII classification, how many columns exist which are PII tagged, how many are sensitive, of how many are maybe third-party owned. You can start looking at this aggregate information. So on that note, let's get back to our slides. So quickly summarizing of what we saw just right now. We saw a DIY setup experience to bring all your metadata and create rich relationships. We saw an Asset 360 profile, similar to what GitHub repo or your account profiles are. We saw a native asset experience. Irrespective of the diversity, every asset has a different experience. We saw an end-to-end lineage, which is right from your relational, transactional, to analytical, to BI, with rich operational metadata. And once you create this foundational value, you're able to start seeing values such as propagation, and you can reuse some of the existing metadata to power knowledge across your data sprawl. Okay, so if everybody is still awake, let's jump to the second one, which is diversity in humans of data. The poll was very relevant. I don't think I need to talk about this anymore. Data teams have diverse personas, analysts, engineers, scientists. And I'm sure while I'm speaking, there are new titles that are getting formed as well. And if you look at all of them, they have their own vocabulary. Each one have their own vocabulary. They use their own tooling. They have their own choices that they make. So just like if you look at Netflix, right? Me, my wife, my mom, all of them have different content needs. Similarly, these personas have different control, curation, and customization needs. So now how does it apply back to Atlan? So on that, let's jump back again to our workspace and let's look at personas. So I'm going to now the governance section of this workspace. So for this demo, we've curated some personas already. The business analysts, data engineers. And if I open one of them, you'll be able to see all the personas, all the users and groups that are part of. You can create policies. You can create metadata policy to control metadata, data policy, glossary policies. You can curate all your assets. And the last C, which you can customize. So you can customize what makes sense, what does not make sense. And the second concept to address diversity is purposes. Now, what does purpose mean? Like different teams use it differently. Some teams use it to define their different analytical layers. This could be gold, silver, bronze, L1, L2, L3. Some teams use purposes to curate assets which are part of a particular project. This could be maybe you are running a churn analysis project and you want to tag all your assets and create a curated experience for that. Or you want to do domains. Maybe you are aligning towards the data mesh culture. You're decentralizing your data teams and you want to create curation based on your domains. You can create a marketing domain, finance domain, and you can create these controls. Now, once you do this, now, as soon as we now go back to the asset experience, you'll see a big switcher on the top, just like what Netflix has when you start up your experience. So let's start with maybe data engineers. Okay, let's start with data engineers. Now, if you're able to notice, as soon as I switch to data engineer, what happens is some of the power filters, which maybe for data engineers, it's not relevant, just vanished. And be able to curate different kind of metadata experience for data engineers. And maybe you'll be able to see much relevant when I switch to some other personas. So what matters to data engineers? Let's take one example. In all my conversation with data engineers, one thing common is they all talk about that they spend 50-60% of time monitoring their pipelines. So let's look at, okay, I want to look at all verified assets. I want to look at where my Airflow run failed. Now, DAGs are not asset aware, which means in Airflow, you don't know what assets are getting impacted. So this is a great morning schedule, which is you suddenly know that this is the blast radius for today. These are the assets which matter today for us to fix. And you'll see there's a big, because it's been integrated with operational metadata, you're able to also see the pipeline, and you're able to see maybe a ticket that the data engineering team is looking at. Let's take maybe one more example. Let's clear up. And let's start maybe with some data quality issues. So maybe you've integrated some data quality issues and you want to look at maybe that failed. Right now, looks like everything is a success. So if I look at this, you see, hey, the quality is success. So which means I don't need to worry about today. So similarly, you can integrate other forms of metadata, find PII data, and find the use cases with data engineers really want to discover and trust this data for. Now let's switch again the persona. Let's go to maybe data analyst. Now for data analysts, maybe one use case is they want to quickly find out maybe in Snowflake, what are some of the primary keys that I care about? So now as soon as I do this, I quickly get to know what are some of the primary keys that are available. I can find what table these are coming from. I can look at readmes if these are available, any resources that could be attached with this asset. So this could be one of the ways that they look at. The other thing we've seen with data analysts they look at, mostly they know what they're looking for because they've been working on similar assets for a while. So they can quickly, you have the traditional hierarchy view, which they're used to in their IDs, where you can find the assets and you can find all the schemas that they're looking at. And it quickly creates that discovery curation experience for that particular schema. Now let's switch to maybe the last persona. Let's switch to a business analyst. So let's clear up all filters and let's look at business analyst. Now, if you see business analyst has been only assigned maybe 12K assets. There is one table, there is a column, there are some terms, business concept, and a dashboard. But business users generally don't know the actual physical asset. They generally search like how I was searching, which is maybe some random keywords or some business concept that they know of. So Atlan's search experience surfaces those, looks at across the metadata and creates that relevance for bringing up those assets. Or sometimes it even goes like this, where they search things like MRR, which are just business concepts. So if you, on the top, if you see, it also surfaces the business concepts. But there's an interesting thing that happened. You also see a physical asset, Instacart snack order time. Now, this MRR is not available in the technical metadata. But because there was a business term or the semantic term MRR that was linked to this, it starts surfacing for someone like a business user. So as long as the semantic layer is curated, business users will be able to search with business concepts and don't need to know the actual technical metadata that exists in the sources. The other interesting thing that they have is they can download a quick sample. So let's look at Instacart snacks order time. They don't need to ask for access. If they need a sample data, they can quickly click this sample data. It quickly brings the sample data in and they can download it, send it with an external consultant in case they're looking for, or a data scientist is looking for a quick sample so that they can decide whether to use it. But if you see interesting thing, the department column is marked as PII. And if you see this is hashed, this is masked, so that even if they send this sample across, this is well controlled and governed. And if they want to quickly do some ad hoc exploration, the functionality is in context, they can just get started right away. So before we close maybe the personas, let's quickly jump to glossaries. So this is the business definitions, where all the business definitions like MRR, ARR are documented. You can even write formulas, put some embeds, talk to owners. So let's say maybe Rohan is one of the owners for this. Let me just say a quick hi for him. So I can quickly go back, and in case you're using Slack, it takes you back to the flow where you actually converse and collaborate. So together, they create this personalized experience that we were talking about. And on that note, let's switch back again to slides, and let's do a quick summary. So we looked at curated asset discovery. We were able to set up some personas and purposes, and we were able to see curated asset discovery experiences, whether this was filtering by tags, hierarchy, custom metadata, operational metadata, and based on the personas, they were able to find the relevant assets that they're looking for. The other one is you were able to democratize data assets, but with the right governance and control. I'm sure all the IT teams, security teams, they want to democratize it, but they want to put the right access controls in as part of this tool. So one of the things we've done is we've balanced the right amount between democratization and with the right amount of security and access control with these personas. Okay, let's go to the third pillar, which is diversity in data tools. So diverse personas lead to diverse tools. Users want context where they are and in flow, right? We started today's conversation with talking about how we bring metadata from these tools to Atlan. So we started asking us a question: can we bring metadata to the tools itself? Rather than us bringing the metadata from these tools, can we take this metadata back to these tools? So instead of a demo for this, I have a quick video, and then we'll get back to some live demos.
Today we'll see 3 things around how Atlan can activate your metadata. In your favorite downstream tool, just click on the Atlan icon, and Atlan sidebar will show up with all the context you'll need about the asset. You can do everything from creating a Jira ticket, or viewing more resources about the asset, or even reaching out to your teammates on Slack directly without leaving your current data tool. Atlan's context always stays with you while you work with your favorite data tool, helping you remain in your state of flow. Now let's see the second thing we've got to show you. Imagine you're reading an important doc, and know it's relevant to document in Atlan. You can directly document a resource without leaving context in one click. Just select the asset from the extension and hit the Add button. And boom, it's available in Atlan. And for our last trick, we know while reading sales report you always have a question on how ARR is defined. You can now search your home for data team from any website, in just one click. We're launching with support for Looker, Tableau, Salesforce and Snowflake. We're really excited to see how your teams use it. Reach out to your nearest Atlanian for access, and experience the power of active metadata.
Okay, so let's get back to the same dashboard, the Looker dashboard we started with. But let's now go to Looker. We see a dashboard loading up, but now you will see this Atlan icon on the bottom. This is powered by a Chrome plugin. And as soon as I click this, the same asset preview that we talked about, the same metadata now is available right here. Maybe you realize there is some typo, you want to fix it, add some descriptions, you can do it right away. You want to quickly look at Lineage, where it's coming from, what's the upstream, what's the downstream. Or maybe you've realized this dashboard number is wrong, or the dashboard is not loading, which happens quite often. You can quickly look at file a Jira ticket right from here. In fact, there's a request for updating the README and adding some column descriptions so that folks are aware. So this is bringing Atlan into BI. Let's take one more example for this. So this is Snowside, and you have this discovery experiences. and you have this asset. Now the same Atlan icon will start following you now across your data tools, which means you can open it up. You will have the same assets, in fact, available. Oh, there's a small nudge here. Let's apply that. Okay. You can see some custom metadata. If there was any stewards, you can see what activities are happening. If there was a column that was dropped for this, what are some of the column names? And you can quickly document across all of this. So again, bringing the same power of metadata, the 360 profile across your different tooling. Now, what about Slack? So we looked at Looker. We've looked at Snowflake. Let's jump to Slack. So let's go to the same channel, our data team channel. We have some commands. Let's maybe type the favorite acronym. And as soon as you do that, you start getting suggestions, even on Slack. So maybe somebody called out what's the definition that we're using for churn, what's the definition we're using for our quarterly rollout. You can quickly send this to a channel. This becomes available. It gets unfurled. It has a link. People can come back to Atlan, read more about it, or find the relevant assets which are right there. So this is how do you bring Atlan's metadata in context, in flow, in the tools that people really like and spend time on. So let's move back to our slides. Okay, what do we see right now? We looked at from how do you create a silo experience to how do you create an embedded experience. Take the power of metadata and bring it to your favorite tools. We saw context on demand. You're looking at the dashboard on demand. You want all the kind of context that is needed to trust that dashboard or to create your request workflows between your data engineers or the teams that are actually monitoring these dashboards. And reduce switching costs, right? If you're using one tool, you will get the Atlan experience. You don't need to switch back to Atlan. Atlan will be right there as an icon with your tools. Okay, let's go to the last, but not the least, which is you have personas, diverse personas, you have diverse tools, you have diverse assets, which also leads to diverse use cases. And these use cases might depend based on industries, maturity, data stack, or complexity of data. So what we've done from an Atlan perspective is we've made Atlan extendable. So to cater to all kinds of use cases across different teams. So you have open APIs where you can programmatically. So in fact, a lot of the programmatic metadata that you saw could be pushed from something like Airflow. You have a package marketplace where in future, you'll be able to build your own connectors and metadata packages. We are exposing a lot of these events where a column get dropped, or maybe a description got changed, or PI got tagged. We are exposing that for teams to actually leverage that to create their own custom use cases downstream. And in fact, to talk about those use cases, I'm going to pass on to Mark, who leads our sales engineering efforts. We're going to talk about some amazing customers of how they're leveraging some of these extensibility and driving their use cases. So Mark, over to you.
Hey, folks. All right. So as Varun kind of walked us through a lot of the product UI functionality for various embedded collaboration use cases and metadata activation on that front, I wanted to walk you through some of the use cases that we're seeing with some of our customers that are very platform driven, so a little bit more difficult to demo. So I thought we would kind of walk you through some of the problem statements and use cases and architectures that are essentially our customers are building on top of Atlan. So the first is with a Fortune 100 technology company. This is a very complex organization. They're managing enterprise data across, 70,000 employees and hundreds of thousands of different customers. They have a very complex data lake environment and have a suite of downstream APIs. They're actually consuming the data and are powering their customer experience platform. So it's a bit of a different use case, and it's not necessarily BI tools that are consuming the data from their data lake. rather there's APIs that are powering a platform. Now, there's hundreds of metadata change events that are happening across over 100,000 tables in their data lake environment. And this has caused challenges across two domains. The first domain is on the security side. So if there's a schema change or a data classification change, the security team doesn't really understand or have visibility into what was that schema change, if there was a new column added, what's actually in that column, if a data classification was added or removed, why. And so the triage process is highly kind of reactionary and an extremely manual process to kind of dig through potential changes in the data lake environment. And so this induced a significant risk from a security and compliance perspective. From the other avenue was on the business side that the engineering team was managing. And so they want to understand if there is, say, a schema change that occurs in the data lake environment. What was that change? How is it going to impact their downstream API endpoints that are powering their CX platform? And there's really no human in the loop there because it's not, say, a downstream analyst that might notice something off. It's a downstream system that's consuming the information. So this kind of induces a business risk in that changes to their environment could, impact their own customers. And so that's kind of the problem statement. The after state here, architecture with Atlan. So as Varun had mentioned, we have an extremely extensible and flexible platform. One of the things that we have embedded in our platform is a Kafka queue. This Kafka queue tracks metadata changes. So things like schema changes, things like classification tags being added or removed. And we've opened up this Kafka queue with an integration into AWS Event Bridge so that customers can configure any type of downstream actions based on the change events that we're picking up in Kafka. And so in this flow, the security team is kind of proactively alerted with a WebEx Teams notification, automatically opening up a Jira ticket if any one of these metadata change events occurred. On the engineering side, similarly, notifications that can also programmatically trigger data tests to have an automated kind of remediation workflow. So provide both notifications and visibility to the security teams, as well as immediate actionable steps that can be taken to remediate any issues. And so this really falls into the bucket of programmatic governance. Huge impact in that the customer was going from either no process or highly manual process to really having most of this flow automated, ultimately reducing the kind of business risk as well as the security and compliance risk. Just going to do a quick time check here. It'll take 2 more minutes to cover one more use case. So this is another use case that comes from a customer that's a leading media analytics platform. They have a massive amount of data in their ecosystem on the petabyte scale, and they buy a lot of external data feeds. Now, these external data feeds have contractual obligations associated with their data. And when the data needs to be deleted, it might be a little bit difficult to see, but there's this multi-step process that is entirely manual and human driven. And this opens up issues around, human dependent processes. People forget to perform one step of the process, the whole process breaks. And of course, there was contractual penalties if the data was not deleted or if they couldn't prove that the data was deleted. Ultimately, the crux of it is that they were managing this with human beings in Excel spreadsheets. And that was creating this contractual breaches and legal risk. So with Atlan, they developed an automated workflow, which used a combination of our native extraction features as well as integration with our APIs. So instead of those manual steps with a spreadsheet, Atlan essentially crawls the data from S3 by way of Glue. There's an automatic notification to the analytics and program managers. A Jira ticket is automatically created based on the contract end date, 30 days before the contract end date. Then the deletion of data from S3 happens programmatically based on that end date. And then they notify the legal and compliance teams with a report of data destruction. So really kind of the more advanced use cases that are and indicative of how our customers are using a combination of our native extraction capabilities as automation capabilities and the extensibility of our API to really take these complex data operations and automate them and ultimately lead to reducing legal risk and saving the productivity and time of the data teams, as well as I might mention morale, because I don't think anyone here wants to be manually updating spreadsheets these days. And then I guess final piece is that these two use cases are just two examples of how customers are extending our platform capabilities to create automated use cases across various domains, but they are by no means comprehensive. But here's some of the other use cases around cost optimization, security, quality. We had one customer that used a combination of metadata and Lineage to find duplicate tables that led to a $50,000 per month reduction in their cloud bill, their BigQuery bill, just by the visibility that they gained from Atlan. So I will pause there. Prukalpa, do you want to take it over next?
Yep. Thanks, Mark. Awesome. So the one thing that, just want to share, there were a ton of questions that I saw on chat about, do you support this? Or, can we build our own custom connector? And so fundamentally just want to talk about one core thing that in our architecture that helps make this happen behind the scenes. So fundamentally, Atlan is open by design. What that means is that we're fully extensible. This means you could create your own sources and connect into your own sources. You could create your own asset types. We have a customer that's creating API as their asset type that they want to bring in and build an asset profile around. And fundamentally, all of this is built on Kubernetes and Argo, which creates fundamental infinite scalability in your ecosystem. And so with that, we want to actually stop the Atlan demo and talk a little bit on what does this really mean for the future, right? We talked a lot about diversity today. And the reality is that this diversity is only increasing, right? There is an increasing diversity in scale and volume of data. There's an increasing diversity in data infrastructure, data stack, data products. And there's an increasing diversity in data roles, right? Roles like analytics engineers, data platform teams are becoming more and more mainstream today than they ever were before. And this diversity basically means that as data organizations and data people, we are in constant chaos mode. We're constantly reactive, and we're not able to actually take a proactive approach to fixing stuff in our organizations. And breaking this chaos needs a fundamental new approach, right? And this is something that we call DataOps. We've talked about the word DataOps a lot, but what the heck is DataOps, right? So stepping back, let's look at all the other domains in our organizations. Sales teams have sales ops and sales enablement, right? That focus on ramp time and success of the sales team. Our developer teams have DevOps and developer productivity engineering that focuses on developer productivity. Product teams have product ops and agile. So while all of these other domains in our orgs have focus teams that are focused on enabling that function, why don't we have one in the data team, right? And that's really what DataOps is really about. DataOps is not a product category. It's really a culture, a practice, a function that enables the rest of the organization to achieve value from data. This function doesn't just it doesn't actually execute data or analytics projects. It instead focuses on the tools, processes, automation, and culture that helps the rest of the organization get value from data, right? And the consumers of the DataOps team are the data team itself. So improving productivity of the data team, reducing ramp time. We talked about onboarding as a challenge. Data consumers, so enabling self-service, reducing data service requests, and reducing dependencies on the data team. And finally, data platforms itself. The use case that Mark talked about earlier today was a customer experience platform that was actually being fed by metadata to build a ton of automation, right? So as you think about your actual data platforms that are running completely programmatic automated workflows, how do you actually start supporting some of that centrally? So the best analogy that I like to think of in terms of what data ops teams do, revenue ops teams activate revenue data to help organizations improve revenue growth. Product ops teams activate product data to help build better products. Data ops teams activate data, which is metadata, to help organizations achieve value from their data. We've used this word activate quite a bit today, right? Activate metadata and bring it back into your daily workflows. What does activation really mean? So before we summarize what we mean by active metadata, I think it's important to actually understand what's the before state, right? What is the traditional, what is the current state? The current state of traditional metadata management, also called sometimes data catalogs, also called sometimes data governance. The reality is that, it's pretty passive. What does that mean? First, it's siloed. It brings together metadata from a bunch of different sources and goes and puts it into this one other tool, and we call it the data catalog or the data governance tool. But the problem with that approach is that if you think about it as an end consumer, I want context where I am and when I need it. When I'm in that BI tool and say, can I trust this dashboard? The last thing I want to do at that point is jump to another tool, search for my login, search for the dashboard, then look at Lineage, right? I want context where I am and when I need it, which is one element of activation is how do you bring that back into daily workflows. Second, they're generic. Varun talked a lot about personalization, so I won't go deeper into this, but context means very different things to different people, right? A data engineer, when they look at that same table, they care about the quality tests and the pipeline metrics. An analyst, when they look at that same table, they care about column descriptions and frequency distribution. When Netflix can give you and me completely personalized experiences, why can't we do something like that for our data teams? And third, they're pretty closed systems, right? They're relatively manual. Metadata goes in and gets logged up. And can't really drive a ton of programmatic value that metadata can do today in the ecosystem. And so what we mean by going from passive to active is really, how do you go from taking metadata from a silos to actually embedding it back into the day-to-day workflows of teams, be it through a Chrome extension that follows you through your browsers and all your data tools, be it in Slack, be it in Jira. How do you go from generic to super personalized experiences so that every data user gets exactly the context that they need at the time that they need it? And third, how do you go from closed to truly open by default, where metadata can be used and leveraged for a ton of programmatic use cases, from cost optimization, security, observability, and so on. And so with that, I want to end with my version of I Have a Dream, which was the song that was playing when we started today, if you heard the lyrics. We're on, at Atlan on a mission to help data teams do their life's best work. And we hope that we see that change as teams go from being passive, siloed, generic, logged in, to truly active, embedded, personalized, and open, to build a truly data ops driven culture. With, we talked about right at the start of this, the biggest challenge being trust and collaboration. So truly trust focused and collaborative environment. So with that, thank you. I hope that gives you a sense of what we've been working on behind the scenes in Atlan for the last year. This platform upgrade has been something that the team's been working on for over a year. Taking feedback from all the data teams that we work with to truly understand what it'll take to sort of create that next generation of metadata. We're data people, we love feedback. You'll see that Lena just shared a quick feedback form I can see a ton of messages on the chat, which is very, very heartwarming. Please continue to give us feedback. Everything that we do is to help data teams do their lives best work, and all the feedback is super, super helpful and heartwarming as we build this future together with you all.